Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to dive into a case that is, well, it's going to make you wonder how well you really know anyone.
Yeah, this one's got it all. Love, lies, a little bit of genius, and a whole lot of mystery.
Ooh, I like that. A little bit of genius and a whole lot of mystery. We should use that for the title, but for now, we're calling this one To Catch a Genius.
Okay, I'm intrigued already. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot to unpack.
We do, we really do. And it all comes from this 48 Hours episode, same name, To Catch a Genius.
Okay, so I guess the question is, who are we trying to catch and why?
Well, we're catching a husband, Paul Kouis, and as for the why, well, let's just say this picture-perfect marriage had some pretty dark secrets underneath.
So this is a true crime case then?
Absolutely. But it's more than just a whodunit. It's also about trying to understand the why. Why this woman, Linda Kouis, stayed in this relationship for as long as she did.
Because that's what always gets me in these cases. Like, what keeps someone in a situation that from the outside seems so clearly dangerous?
Right, and how do people like Paul manage to deceive everyone for so long? And what red flags should we be looking out for in our own lives, you know?
These are all really good questions, and honestly, the answers are not always easy or straightforward.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Who was Linda Kouis?
So Linda was, from what I gathered, a really successful woman, had a great career, loved fashion, loved to dance, loved spending time with her friends, lived a pretty full life.
Yeah, she had been married a couple of times before, too, so she wasn't exactly naive about relationships.
Exactly, and that's what makes it even more puzzling, right? You'd think someone with her experience would be a little more cautious.
Then enters Paul, and honestly, he wasn't your typical Prince Charming. He wasn't wealthy. He wasn't, a classic heartthrob. And he was significantly younger than Linda. Like, she was 45, he was 32 when they met.
A bit of an age gap there.
Yeah, for sure. But Paul had this air of intelligence about him. He was like this know-it-all, always claiming to be the smartest guy in the room.
And that's how he snagged Linda. Right, playing the genius card.
In a way, yeah, he even bragged about winning a ton of money on Jeopardy. Like $26,000, which back then was like, whoa.
Yeah, that's a pretty good chunk of change. Definitely adds to that image of him being successful and brilliant.
It's like he was carefully constructing this persona, almost too good to be true. And looking back, there were some massive red flags right from the start.
Oh, like what?
Well, very early in the marriage, Paul starts pushing for Linda to get $1 million life insurance policy, like really early on.
Whoa, okay, yeah, that's definitely a red flag. I mean, why the rush?
Right, it's almost like he's already thinking about,
financial gain potentially at Linda's expense.
Yeah, it's not exactly a romantic gesture, is it?
Not at all, and this is something we often see in cases of financial exploitation. The perpetrator starts making moves for money pretty quickly.
And it's not just us noticing this. Linda's close friend, Mary, she's in the episode, she had some serious reservations about Paul right away.
Oh, so she saw him for what he was?
She definitely picked up on some warning signs, like things that Linda seemed to be completely overlooking. It's almost like they were seeing two completely different people.
That's so interesting, the contrast in their perceptions. Like, Mary's the voice of reason, the outsider who can see things more clearly, and Linda's, well, she's caught up in the relationship, maybe blinded by what she wants to believe.
It makes you wonder, what was it about Paul that made Linda so willing to ignore those concerns? Was it love? Was it denial? Was it something else entirely?
That's the question, isn't it? And it gets even more complicated as we go deeper into this story, because this seemingly perfect couple, well, their facade is about to crumble, and the truth that's revealed is way more sinister than anyone could have imagined.
Buckle up, folks. This one's about to get real. Yeah, and crumble it does, because just a few months into this marriage, Linda starts getting sick, like really sick.
Like what kind of sick?
It's a strange illness. She ends up in the hospital, super weak, like alarmingly thin. You see pictures of her in the episode, and it's scary how much weight she lost.
Oh, wow, so something serious is going on.
Yeah, and then things get even weirder with this incident with her IV bag.
The IV bag, what happened?
So a nurse, Bundy, she notices that Linda's the bag is cloudy, which apparently is not normal at all.
Yeah, that sounds like a bad sign, like something's contaminated.
Exactly, and later tests showed that the bag actually had lidocaine in it, which is that medication they use for numbing,
Lidocaine? In her IV bag? That's crazy, why would that be there?
That's the million-dollar question, and the episode actually has audio from this nurse, Bundy, talking about finding the bag. and you can hear the shock in her voice. It's pretty chilling.
Wow. So at this point, people are starting to suspect foul play, right?
Well, here's the thing. The police interview Linda while she's in the hospital, and she actually brings up Paul as a possible suspect.
Wait, really? So she had suspicions about her own husband?
She does, and she even mentions financial motives, which, considering that whole life insurance thing is pretty significant.
Right, that early push for the $1 million policy. It's all starting to connect.
Yeah, and it's so interesting hearing Linda's voice in these interview clips. You can almost hear this conflict within her, like this pull between loving Paul and this growing feeling that something's really wrong.
Yeah, like she's trying to reconcile these two completely opposing ideas.
Exactly, and even though her friends are begging her to leave him, she's just clinging to this belief that he loves her and would never hurt her.
It's tough to watch, because you want to shake her and be like, girl, open your eyes.
But it's not always that simple, is it? I mean, we're talking about denial, possible manipulation, maybe even fear. Who knows what was going on in her head?
I think it's a combination of things, honestly, and we see this a lot in these cases. The victim is often trapped in a web of psychological and emotional manipulation that makes it really hard to break free.
And sadly, the situation just keeps getting worse. Just 5 months later, Linda's back in the hospital with similar symptoms.
Oh no, so whatever was happening before is happening again.
It seems that way, and this time an alarm is triggered after Paul is seen leaving her room, and the hospital actually restricts his access to her.
So now even the medical staff is suspicious.
Yeah, they're definitely picking up on something, and while Linda's in the hospital, her friend Mary makes a pretty disturbing discovery at the house.
What did she find?
A stack of life insurance documents, and none of them had been reviewed by Linda.
Oh wow, so Paul's been busy behind the scenes.
It looks that way, and Mary's freaking out. She confronts Linda directly, tells her straight up, this guy is planning to cash in on these policies.
And what did Linda do?
She acknowledges that something's not right, but she still refuses to leave Paul. It's like she's stuck in this cycle of denial and maybe even fear.
Fear can be so paralyzing, especially in situations like this.
Yeah, and all this leads up to June 9th, 1994, when Linda suddenly dies.
Oh no.
Paul calls 911, acting like the heartbroken husband. But even then, something about his behavior seems off.
Like what?
He's focused on these trivial things, like missing a business meeting. It's like he's more concerned with appearances than with actually grieving.
Yeah, that lack of genuine emotion, it's definitely a red flag, especially in a situation like this.
And when the autopsy and toxicology reports come back, they reveal a shocking truth. Linda's cause of death: nicotine poisoning.
Nicotine poisoning, like from cigarettes.
Not just any nicotine. The levels in her system were like 4 to 5 times higher than anything they'd ever seen. Plus, there was this weird puncture mark behind her ear.
Okay, now it's starting to sound like murder.
And as the investigation continues, Paul's whole carefully constructed persona starts to unravel. Turns out he wasn't an engineer, didn't win on Jeopardy, wasn't a Mensa member, none of it.
So he was a complete fraud.
A total con man. It's mind-blowing how he managed to fool everyone for so long.
But the truth always comes out, right?
It usually does. But even though Paul's the obvious suspect, there's not enough evidence to directly link him to the nicotine or a syringe, so no charges are filed initially.
So he almost got away with it.
Almost. But years later, this case lands on the desk of Detective Yvonne Shaw, and she becomes obsessed with those interview tapes with Linda. She's determined to get justice.
A good detective can make all the difference in a case like this.
Absolutely. And Detective Shaw, she's a rock star. She digs deep and she uncovers a crucial piece of information that changes everything.
Oh, I'm on the edge of my seat. What is it?
She consults with Dr. Neil Benovitz, the nicotine expert from the original investigation. And he reveals something that he hadn't shared before.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What did he say?
He explains that death from a lethal dose of nicotine like that would be incredibly rapid, like within 20 to 30 minutes.
Whoa, so Linda would have died almost instantly.
Exactly, and that's the bombshell, because it completely destroys Paul's alibi. He claimed to have been home alone with Linda for hours that night. But if what Dr. Benowitz is saying is true, there's no way Paul wasn't involved.
This is it. This is the break in the case they needed.
So Detective Shaw, she knows she's got to be smart about this. She can't just go in guns blazing. Paul's too clever for that.
Yeah, he'd see right through it.
Exactly. So they come up with this plan, this sting operation, and honestly, it's brilliant.
Okay, I'm all ears. How do they catch him?
They convince Paul that he's being interviewed by detectives from, get this, a small town in Kansas.
Kansas? Like, what's the connection?
There is none. It's all made up. They're pretending to be investigating some totally unrelated case. just a way to get him talking.
Ah, so they're lulling him into a false sense of security.
Exactly. They even use a fake name for Detective Shaw. They call her Marie.
Wow, they really went all out. I bet Paul was eating it up.
He was, totally. In the beginning, he's so smug, so arrogant. You can hear it in the interrogation tapes. It's like he thinks he's outsmarted these small-town cops.
Classic narcissist, always underestimating everyone else.
But Detective Shaw, she's playing the long game. She lets him talk, lets him spin his web of lies, and she keeps bringing him back to his alibi. You know, he was home alone with Linda for hours that night.
Right, the alibi that Dr. Benowitz's testimony completely blows apart.
Bingo. And that's how she gets him. She waits for the perfect moment and then just drops the bomb.
She tells him about the rapid death from nicotine poisoning.
Yeah, she lays it all out, and you can practically see the blood drain from his face. His whole facade just crumbles.
That must have been so satisfying to watch.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing. Finally, after 16 years, justice is served. Paul Kouis is arrested for the murder of Linda Kouis.
It's a bittersweet victory, though, isn't it? I mean, it doesn't bring Linda back.
No, it doesn't, and it makes you think about all the what-ifs. You know, what if someone had intervened sooner? What if Linda had listened to her friends? It's just a tragic story all around.
But I think there's also a message of hope here, you know, a message that even after all those years, justice can still prevail.
Yeah, absolutely. And Detective Shaw, she's a true hero in this story. Her dedication, her refusal to give up, that's what ultimately brought Paul Kouis to justice.
It's a reminder that we should never give up on the truth, and we should always fight for what's right.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And, you know, this case, it really gets you thinking about the darker side of human nature, the power of deception, the vulnerability we all have when it comes to love and trust.
It's a reminder that we have to be vigilant, we have to pay attention to those red flags, and we have to trust our gut instincts.
Because sometimes the person you think you know best is the one you should be most afraid of.
And if you're ever in a situation that feels unsafe or controlling, please reach out for help. You are not alone. There are people who care, and there are resources available to support you.
This deep dive has been a wild ride, full of twists and turns, but ultimately it's a story about the triumph of truth and justice, even when it takes years to come to light. And Linda's story, it serves as a powerful reminder that we should never be afraid to speak out, to question, to fight for what we believe in, and to never stop seeking justice for those who can no longer fight for